I came home with nothing, bro. And nothing. I ain't had no clothes. I ain't had nowhere to stay. I ain't had nothing. I lost everything when I was in there. Storage units got hit. Lost all that. All the cars gone. Jewelry gone. Nothing, bro. I ain't had nothing. I was going to go stay.
Fetty Wap was pulling in over $100,000 every single day at his absolute peak. Not a month, not a week. Every single day. He had a fleet of exotic cars that most people will never even sit in once in their lifetime. He was renting out mansions in multiple cities at the same time, living like a king who had conquered the world. He was taking care of his entire circle. Jewelry dripping, bills paid, trips popping off, everything. And the entire world knew his name. But right now, at 34 years old, Fetty Wap just walked out of a federal prison after getting caught up in a multi-state drug trafficking operation. Word is he came home broke, with no deal, no bag, and nowhere to go except his sister's house. No label waiting for him with open arms. No comeback tour already booked. Just a man standing in the wreckage of a life that was once worth millions, trying to figure out his next move from absolute scratch. When you actually sit down and trace how this whole thing unfolded, the meteoric rise, the reckless spending, the career collapse, the federal case, all of it, the full picture is way more tragic than most people know. Because this isn't just a story about a rapper going broke. This is about what happens when everything comes too fast, when nobody around you tells you the truth, and when the music industry moves on and leaves you behind with a lifestyle you can no longer afford. It's a story that starts in the gritty streets of Paterson, New Jersey, passes through the very top of the Billboard charts, and ends, at least for now, in a federal facility and then a spare bedroom at his sister's place. To understand where Fetty Wap is right now, you got to understand where he came from and exactly how far he fell. Fetty Wap, born Willie Jr. Maxwell II on June 7, 1991, is a rapper from Paterson, New Jersey. Best known for his breakout smash Trap Queen, which transformed him from a completely unknown local artist into one of the most recognizable names in music seemingly overnight. Paterson is a city in Passaic County that has long struggled with poverty, crime, and economic decline. It's not glamorous. It's not a place most people associate with the music industry or generational wealth. It's a city where a lot of people grind their whole lives just to stay afloat, and where the streets have a way of pulling people in before they ever get a real shot at anything else. Growing up in that environment, Fetty was already dealing with more than most kids his age. One of the most significant things about him, something his earliest fans learned and respected quickly, was that he was blind in his left eye. When he was just a baby, he was diagnosed with congenital glaucoma, a condition that affected both eyes. Doctors made the difficult decision to remove his left eye entirely to save his life. The prosthetic he wears to this day is a part of his story he has never hidden or been ashamed of. Growing up visually impaired in a tough city, looking physically different from the kids around you, that's a weight to carry. But by all accounts, Fetty carried it without making it an excuse. If anything, it hardened him and gave him a perspective that a lot of people his age simply didn't have. His home life had its challenges too. His father was locked up during formative years of his childhood, which meant his mother was carrying the family essentially on her own. That's a dynamic that forces kids to grow up fast. And it's one that pushed Fetty toward the streets earlier than he probably should have been there. Paterson was the kind of place where if you weren't careful, the environment made your decisions for you. A lot of his boys were in the streets. A lot of the older guys he looked up to were moving a certain way. When that's your environment and you don't have anybody showing you a different path, it becomes incredibly easy to just follow the lane that's already paved in front of you. It's not weakness. It's just how the math works when you grow up where Fetty grew up. But music was always in the background. From the time he was a teenager, he was drawn to rap, not just listening to it, but actually creating. He was heavily influenced by the Atlanta trap wave, by artists like Gucci Mane, who blended street authenticity with melody and hooks in a way that nobody had really done before. What Fetty was developing in his early 20s was a style that took that melodic trap framework and filtered it through a Jersey sensibility, something that was uniquely his own, even if he hadn't fully figured out how to monetize it yet. Before the world ever heard the name Fetty Wap, before there was a record deal or a radio spin or a check with multiple zeros on it, there was just a young dude from Paterson recording music independently with no clear path to anything. No management team with industry connections, no label with a marketing budget, no producer with a proven track record who was willing to bet on him. He was doing this the hard way. session by session, building something from nothing in a city that doesn't have a reputation for producing rap superstars. Most people who start that path never finish it. They give up, or the streets get them, or life just makes other decisions for them. Around 2013, Fetty linked up with a producer from the Jersey area named Peoples. The chemistry between them was immediate. Peoples had a sound that fit perfectly with what Fetty was going for. Atmospheric, heavy on melody, built for the kind of emotional delivery that Fetty was naturally inclined toward. Together, they started building records that felt genuinely different from what was coming out of the mainstream at the time. There was something about the combination of Fetty's singing-rapping style and Peoples' production that felt fresh, even if nobody outside their immediate circle had heard it yet. By 2014, they had a record that both of them believed in deeply. A song about loyalty, hustle, and the streets, but told with enough heart and melody to cross over beyond just a street audience. That song was Trap Queen. They put it out into the world, not knowing what was about to happen. For a little while, it seemed like it might just be another record that came and went without making much noise. But then the internet found it. Trap Queen didn't blow up overnight in the traditional sense. It built. It started getting picked up by blogs. It started spreading on SoundCloud. People were sharing it because they genuinely liked it, not because a label was paying for placement. And that organic energy is actually the most powerful kind. Because when something catches traction like that, it's almost impossible to stop. By early 2015, Trap Queen had crossed from the internet into real-world radio. Program directors were getting flooded with requests. DJs were spinning it at clubs and watching crowds go crazy. And then it hit the charts. Then it kept climbing. By the time it peaked, Trap Queen had reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100, the main singles chart in the entire country. #2 in America, a completely independent record from a kid nobody had heard of a year earlier, had nearly reached the top of the most competitive pop chart in the world. The industry moved fast after that. Every major label wanted a meeting. A&R reps who had never heard of Paterson, New Jersey, were suddenly very interested in what Willie Maxwell had to say. 300 Entertainment, co-founded by music executive Lyre Cohen, ultimately signed Fetty and gave him the infrastructure to take what he had built independently to a completely different scale. Suddenly, he had real distribution, real marketing budgets, real radio promotion. The machine was behind him, and he used every bit of it. Later, in 2015, he released 679, which became another massive hit. Then My Way, then the self-titled debut album, which debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. And the numbers weren't just decent, they were historic. At one point during the fall of 2015, Fetty Wap had 3 songs simultaneously charting in the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100. 3 songs at the same time. That had not been done in decades. The last artist to pull that off before him was the Beatles. Let that sink in. He was on magazine covers, headlining festival stages, and getting feature calls from artists across every genre. The money was rolling in from every direction. Touring, streaming, sync deals, appearances, merchandise. The come-up was real, and it was fast, and it showed no signs of slowing down. In the span of about 14 months, Fetty Wap went from recording independently in New Jersey with no deal to being one of the most commercially successful rappers on the planet. And the money that came with that level of success was genuinely staggering. At his peak, estimates put his daily earnings at over $100,000. When you factor in touring revenue, streaming royalties on multiple charting songs, features that were commanding serious fees, live appearances, and the album rollout, that number ain't as crazy as it sounds. The math was real. Reports even suggested he had seen upwards of $22 million in his accounts during that explosive period. For a man who came from nothing, who had watched his city struggle his whole life, who had grown up without financial stability or luxury of any kind, that kind of money was intoxicating. Not in a metaphorical way, literally intoxicating. It changes the way you think. It changes the way you move. And if you don't have the right people around you keeping you grounded, it can change you in ways that are very hard to come back from. Fetty's spending during this period became legendary, and not in a good way. And the cars came first. He started buying exotic vehicles the way other people buy sneakers: Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Bentleys, McLarens. At one point, his collection reportedly numbered around a dozen high-end vehicles, and stories circulated of him even gifting dozens more to friends and family. He wasn't shy about flaunting them. He'd pull up to events in a different whip every time, post them on social media, let the world know he had arrived. For a moment, nobody could really blame him for enjoying what he built. But then the spending got more structural, meaning the expenses started building up in ways that went beyond one-time purchases. Then Fetty started renting out luxury properties in multiple cities at the same time. Not buying, renting. Then he had spots in New Jersey, New York, and Atlanta that he was paying rent on simultaneously, many of which he wasn't even staying in on a consistent basis. When you're doing $100,000 a day, that kind of overhead feels manageable. But monthly rent on multiple high-end properties adds up to serious money. And unlike a car you could theoretically sell, you ain't getting that rent money back. He was also spending heavily on the people around him. And this is actually the most complicated part of his peak era thing, because Fetty's generosity was real. People who were close to him during that time consistently say that he wasn't performing for the cameras. He genuinely wanted to take care of his people. He was covering bills for family members, buying jewelry for his boys, taking his whole crew on trips, throwing events, making sure everybody around him ate well. When you come from nothing and you suddenly have everything, that instinct to bring your people with you is understandable. It comes from a real place. But the problem is that generosity without structure is just a more emotionally satisfying way to go broke. And nobody in Fetty's circle at that point seemed to be having the hard conversations about sustainability. Nobody was sitting him down and saying, hey, this level of income is not guaranteed to last. And the way you're spending right now requires it to never stop. On top of all of this, Fetty had multiple children with multiple women during this period. By some accounts, 6 children with several different mothers. He was supporting all of them, which was the right thing to do. But the financial obligations attached to that many children, combined with everything else he was spending on, created a baseline of expenses that required the music money to keep flowing at full volume just to stay even. And the music industry, as Fetty was about to find out, does not stay at full volume forever. The fall started gradually, the way these things usually do. It wasn't one moment, it wasn't one bad album that tanked everything. It was a slow drift, a gradual fading of momentum that didn't seem catastrophic at first, but added up to something devastating over time. By 2016, the cultural conversation had moved on. The artists who were dominating had different sounds, different energies. The melodic Jersey trap that Fetty had pioneered felt slightly dated to the streaming audience, which was now moving at an even faster pace than it had been when Trap Queen dropped. He kept releasing music, dropping projects, putting out singles, staying active, but none of it was cutting through the way his earlier work had. The streaming numbers were there, but not at the level of 2015. The radio wasn't embracing the new material with the same enthusiasm. One of the brutal realities of blowing up as fast as Fetty did is that the ceiling for everything after is set impossibly high. When your first real record goes top 5 in the country and your debut album hits number 1, every subsequent release gets measured against that and almost nobody in the history of music has been able to sustain that level of success indefinitely. The industry creates these peaks and then watches artists struggle to recapture them. And when they can't, which most of them can't, the narrative shifts. Suddenly, the conversation is less about what you're building and more about whether you're still relevant. By 2018 and into 2019, Fetty's commercial standing had declined significantly. The touring bag was lighter, the feature rate had dropped, labels weren't coming to the table with the kinds of numbers they had been offering 3 years earlier. He was still a name, people still knew who he was, still respected what he had done. But the machine had stopped, and the lifestyle he had built had not stopped alongside it. The cars still needed insurance, the property still needed rent, the kids still needed support, the entourage still needed to eat, and the checks were getting smaller every month, while the bills stayed exactly the same. Then life hit him in a way that the money couldn't fix and the streets couldn't prepare you for. In 2021, Fetty's 4-year-old daughter Lauren passed away. The circumstances were described as accidental, a fatal cardiac arrhythmia due to complications of congenital cardiac anomalies, and the grief that followed was public and raw. Fetty spoke about losing her, and the pain was evident to anybody who saw it. 4 years old, his little girl gone. There is no coming back from that kind of loss. In the same way you came before it, that kind of grief reshapes a person permanently. It rewires the way you see everything, the way you move through a day, the way you make decisions. It doesn't heal the way other things heal. And when you're already dealing with financial pressure, a fading career, and the weight of supporting multiple families, carrying that level of loss on top of everything else creates a state of mind where bad decisions can start to feel like the only options available. By the time late 2021 was wrapping up, Fetty was in a very dark place, not just financially, not just professionally. Thing as a human being, as a father, as a man who had already been through more than most people could handle, he was carrying more weight than almost anyone could hold without eventually buckling. Thing when the music income dried up and the bills kept coming, Fetty made a move that he clearly knew was dangerous. Thing federal investigators have been watching a drug trafficking operation for a significant period of time. A ring that was moving heroin, fentanyl, crack cocaine, and oxycodone across multiple states, primarily in and around the Long Island area of New York. And Fetty Wap was allegedly right in the middle of it. Not on the fringes, not loosely connected, right in the middle of it, according to what the government eventually laid out in court. The feds don't move until they have what they need. That's how federal investigations work. They build and build and build, sometimes for years, until they have a case that they're confident they can win. By the time they arrested Fetty in October of 2021, they had been building their case carefully and methodically. And the way they chose to arrest him made it clear they weren't trying to be subtle about it. Fetty was at Rolling Loud, New York, one of the biggest hip-hop festivals in the country, when federal agents came to take him into custody. He was brought out in front of witnesses, in front of cameras, at a music event that thousands of people were attending. It was a very public, very deliberate takedown, and the optics of it were impossible to escape. The contrast between the festival setting and the handcuffs was jarring in a way that felt almost symbolic, like the industry he had once dominated was literally the backdrop for his arrest. The indictment named Fetty and 5 co-defendants, charging them with conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute controlled substances. The government's allegations described a structured operation, not a loose informal arrangement, but an organized effort to move substantial quantities of drugs across state lines. The kinds of quantities that carry serious federal time. He initially pleaded not guilty, but federal cases have an extraordinary conviction rate, and the evidence the government had compiled was apparently extensive. By August of 2022, Fetty had changed his plea, entering a guilty plea to 1 count of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute controlled substances. It was the realistic move given the circumstances, even though it meant accepting the consequences head-on. The pretrial period also produced one of the most damaging moments of the entire case. While he was out on bond, audio leaked from a FaceTime call in which Fetty was allegedly threatening a co-defendant, telling this person that they were a target. The judge handling the case took it extremely seriously. There was real discussion about whether his bail would be revoked on the spot. For a man who was already in a precarious legal position, it was about the worst possible thing that could have happened. In 2023, the sentence came down: 6 years in federal prison. For a man who had been in Rolling Stone magazine, who had performed for tens of thousands of people, who had once had the #2 song in the entire country, 6 years in a federal facility was where the road he had chosen eventually led. He reported to custody and began serving his time. Fetty Wap came home in early 2026, having served just over 3 years, less than the full 6-year sentence thanks to good behavior program participation and the First Step Act. The word from people who know him is that he came out with a clearer head than he went in with. That the time away from the noise, from the chaos, from the pressure of the industry and the streets, gave him a chance to actually think about his life without distraction. He reportedly participated in programs while incarcerated and kept a low profile throughout his sentence. No major disciplinary issues, no drama making the news. Prison strips everything away. All the yes men are gone. All the distractions are gone. The cars, the parties, the attention, none of it reaches you in there. And what you are left with is yourself. And whatever truths you have been running from have a way of catching up in that kind of quiet. Just a man serving his time and apparently doing the work. Whatever that looked like for him day to day on the inside. But hope doesn't pay rent. The reality he came home to is stark. The money from his peak years is gone. The cars have been sold or repossessed. The rental properties are in somebody else's hands. The entourage has scattered the way entourages tend to do when the bag isn't there anymore. There is no major label deal sitting on the table waiting for his signature. No team of managers and publicists already working a comeback strategy. Right now, at 34 years old, Fetty Wap is reportedly staying at his sister's house, rebuilding from the ground up, with a federal conviction on his record and a story that the whole world already knows the details of. His sister, by all accounts, has been one of the few constants, One of those real ones who was there before the fame and is still there after the fall. And sometimes that's what getting back up actually looks like. Not a label deal, not a viral moment, just family, a roof, and a second chance. What Fetty Wap accomplished at his peak deserves to be acknowledged clearly and without qualification because it really was remarkable. Being a young man from Paterson, New Jersey, a city with no real pipeline to the music industry, no infrastructure for launching superstars, built something entirely on his own talent, his own hunger, and his own belief in a sound that nobody else was making. He did it without the traditional cosigns. He did it as a man who had been visually impaired from childhood, who had grown up without his father in the house, who had come from a neighborhood that had a way of making people disappear before they ever got a shot. Trap Queen is still a song that makes people feel something when it comes on. It still gets played at parties. People who were in middle school when it dropped still know every word. That kind of staying power doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't go away. Expanding deeper into this narrative, you have to appreciate just how improbable Fetty's ascent truly was in the broader context of hip-hop history, in an era dominated by polished, internet-savvy acts and established Southern trap heavyweights. Here came this one-eyed kid from the bricks of North Jersey flipping melodies over hard-hitting beats in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. His voice, that signature raspy melodic delivery, cut through the noise like few others. It wasn't just about the hooks. It was the vulnerability mixed with street bravado. Tracks like 679 Inches with its playful energy and My Way with that triumphant anthemic feel showed he wasn't a one-hit wonder. For a brief window in 2015, Fetty Wap wasn't just hot, he was the moment. He redefined what melodic rap could sound like for a new generation, influencing everyone from post-2015 trap singers to artists blending auto-tune with real emotion. His run paralleled the explosion of streaming, where organic virality could launch careers faster than any radio push ever could. Yet the industry is a beast that devours its young. Compare Fetty's story to others who burned bright and crashed. Think of the cautionary tales from Ja Rule's post-50 Cent fade, or more recent ones where quick fame led to similar spirals. The pattern repeats. Sudden wealth without infrastructure leads to overextension. Fetty's philanthropy in Paterson, handing out turkeys for Thanksgiving Easter gifts and trying to uplift his city, showed a heart in the right place, but it also highlighted the pressure of being the one who made it for an entire community. That emotional tax is rarely discussed. He wasn't just spending on himself, he was trying to rewrite the narrative for everyone left behind, which amplified the financial drain when the momentum slowed. Post-release, Fetty has spoken about coming home with a clear mindset, feeling rehabilitated, focusing on purpose, and even considering practical paths like starting an HVAC business alongside music. He's back in New Jersey, under supervised release, emphasizing family and giving back. The fans who rocked with him in 2015 never fully stopped caring. His catalog still generates streams, and there's talk of new music, tours, and rebuilding. At 34, with life experience that no amount of money can buy, he has runway that many in similar situations never get. The lane he created still exists. Younger artists built on that melodic trap foundation and would likely welcome him back with open arms. The tragedy of Fetty's story is that it really did not have to end up here. The money was there. The opportunities were there. What wasn't there, or at least wasn't there strongly enough, was the financial literacy, the discipline, and the honest support system that could have protected him from the decisions he made when things got hard. He needed people around him who would tell him the truth when he was renting multiple properties he didn't need and buying cars when the streams were slowing down. He needed guidance that went beyond just cashing checks and keeping the vibe alive. The loss of his daughter Lauren in 2021 is the part of this story that deserves more space than it typically gets. Because whatever you think about the drug case, whatever conclusions you draw about his financial choices, a man losing his 4-year-old daughter is a pain that exists on a completely different level than any career conversation. That loss is permanent, and facing it while simultaneously watching a life unravel financially and legally is more than most human beings could handle without making some very bad decisions. At 34, Fetty still has runway. He's not done. There are artists who have come back from federal cases, from financial ruin, from being completely written off and rebuilt meaningful careers and meaningful lives. Whether Fetty is one of those artists, whether this is the bottom before a new chapter begins, is something only he can determine now, what he does with the clarity he found on the inside. whether he builds something new with the wisdom he clearly did not have at 23 years old, suddenly holding $100,000 a day. That's the open question the next few years will answer. The music is still in him. The lane he created still exists. And whether he comes back as an artist, whether he builds something entirely different, whether he finds peace just living a quiet life away from the spotlight that both made him and consumed him, none of those outcomes are off the table. He is 34 years old, thing that is young. That is not the end of anything unless he decides it is. But the story of how a kid from Patterson went from $100,000 a day to federal prison to his sister's couch is one of the most sobering tales this generation of rap has produced. Not because it's unique, because it isn't. This happens over and over again in city after city, with artist after artist. The music industry creates these moments of extraordinary wealth and fame around young people who have never had either, hands them a check with no instruction manual, and then moves on to the next thing. And the ones who don't have the right foundation, who don't have the right people in their corner, who don't have the discipline or the guidance to protect what they've built, they end up exactly where Fetty ended up. Broke on the other side of a sentence, things starting over with nothing but whatever they found out about themselves in the dark. The saddest part is that none of it had to happen this way. The talent was there, the platform was there, the money was definitely there. It just needed somebody to protect it, and nobody did. The music industry will always find the next young artist with fire in them and nothing in the bank. Hand them the world and watch what happens. What we can hope is that stories like Fetty's start to travel further, that young artists coming up see this and understand that building a team, protecting your money, and staying grounded when the spotlight finds you is not optional. It's the difference between a legacy and a cautionary tale. That is the real tragedy here. Not just the fall, but everything that could have been prevented if the right systems had been in place. Rest in peace to his daughter Lauren, and for Fetty Wap, hopefully the next chapter is the one that actually lasts.